Hi everyone, this is Neel Raithatha, also known as the Wax Whisperer. Thank you for joining me in my latest video. We have here a patient who attended with bilateral, fully occluding earwax, and I'm just commencing with their left ear first. You may have noticed that this patient's entrance of the ear at least is quite hairy, and having hairs on our ears is absolutely normal. Sometimes when I show some of my patients back the video of their ears, they're aghast by how many hairs they have, and I have to explain that actually these hairs are normal. Most of us have these hairs, and these hairs have a purpose. So the hairs at the root, where the follicles are, you have attached sebaceous glands, and sebaceous glands are responsible for secreting a viscous solution called sebum. We also find sebum, they're secreted by the hairs on our scalp. And sebum is a viscous, oily, lipid, fatty solution, and it's there to protect the ear canal. It's slightly acidic, so its chemical composition helps to inhibit certain bacterial and fungal growth. Also, sebum helps to moisturize and lubricate the skin, preventing it from drying, and it helps the skin to retain its internal moisture. Without sebum, the moisture within the skin cells, it rises to the surface and then it evaporates, and we can get really dry, itchy skin. And so sebum is a really important secretion within the ear, and eventually sebum combines with a less viscous oily sweat secreted by the ceruminous glands. So ceruminous glands are glands exclusively found within the ear canal, under our armpits and in our groin area, and they secrete an oily sweat. So the oily sweat combines with sebum, and eventually that combines with dead exfoliated skin cells and hairs and other debris to form earwax. So without sebum, you're very likely to have very dry, itchy ears, and you're possibly more prone to developing ear infections because you just don't have that acidity that sebum brings. So sebum is really important, so therefore these hairs are important. Now, of course, if you have excessive hairs, there's a possibility that you produce more wax because, as I mentioned, sebum eventually combines with the other ingredients to form earwax. In addition, if you have excessive hairs, it's plausible that as the wax is trying to migrate out of the ear, it gets trapped by the hair, so the hairs mat it against it. It's like a spider's web, so it prevents it from escaping. So there is a fine balance. There's only really been one occasion or possibly be a couple of occasions in my whole career that I felt the need to remove some of these hairs, and that was when I just literally could not visualize the inside of the ear, and it was becoming a bit unsafe to remove or attempting to remove earwax. And the way I removed the hair strands was I plucked them using forceps. It was a technique shown to me by my mentor, Mr Darius Rajali. He's a consultant ENT surgeon in the UK, and yeah, it worked really, really well. And in fact, you're going to see me use a forceps in a moment to just remove this long whisker of hair that's got trapped in the ear. The patient was feeling this one slightly, it was a bit itchy, so I thought, let's get this out. And there we are. I was going to re-enter the ear. So there is some natural surface wax. I did hover over it, it wasn't coming away easily. That would mean me potentially trying to remove that wax, staining the canal by coming in contact with the bony part of the ear canal, which I didn't want to do. It wasn't necessary, so we left it as that. The patient could hear perfectly fine. So this is their right ear. In this ear, I don't know whether you noticed when I first tried to enter the ear, they've got a very, very narrow ear canal entrance. It's possibly collapsed. So when we say a collapsed ear canal, the outer third of the ear is made up of cartilage, and this cartilage over the years can weaken, and it can then almost collapse upon itself. Think about the cartilage as a scaffolding, and it's kind of formed kind of an oval shape to resemble the ear canal, and that scaffolding, that cartilage can weaken, which can cause the ear canal to collapse. Typically in the outer third, the bony part of the ear canal is less likely to collapse, so the inner 2/3 of the ear canal very rarely collapses unless possibly you sustain some trauma or an infection and the bone weakens. Also, the posterior part of the entrance of the ear, so the cartilage that forms the back wall, that can continue to grow, and it can overgrow in some respects, and then fall upon its own weight. So there can be surgery that is performed to trim that cartilage or to reposition some of the cartilage so it's more sturdy and you have a bit of structural support. But that's only really done in extreme circumstances. In a case like this, as long as it's not becoming debilitating for the patient and they can have their ears cleaned on a regular basis, they're not developing ear infections or it's preventing them from wearing a hearing aid, for example, this patient won't need any surgery for that. They've got a really sticky consistency of wax. They also did have in their left side, but more so this side. So I've just instilled some medical grade olive oil spray. And as you can see, the olive oil spray helps to bind this wax together. When you've got glutinous, mushy wax like this, it can be really problematic to vacuum because it keeps blocking the inside of the suction probe and it comes away in little bits. If you use a Jobson horn, for example, you may just start spreading this soft consistency of wax against the canal walls, making it more difficult to remove. Naturally, if you use an ear hook or forceps, you're just going to dissect through this. So the olive oil helps to bind the wax together, and as you can see there, it comes out in larger chunks. Nice, healthy looking eardrum, just some residual wax around the edge, somebody in the midsection of the ear canal on the posterior inferior floor. And I'm just hovering over with a fine end. You see it's a layer of skin that's dyed. It's semi-shedded, but it's not migrating. So I'm just going to try and get some of this away for the patient. It's a bit more adhered in this section. So this area was definitely more narrow. The patient does have to tend, I think, every 6 months, so twice a year to have this performed, and it's always usually the right ear that's just a bit more, I wouldn't say complex, but just a bit more difficult in comparison to the left because of the anatomy of the ear. It's narrower and the consistency of the wax. Here's a nice piece come out there. So we generally either have dry or wet earwax, and that's governed by a single gene mutation on the ceruminous glands. There's a gene called ABCC11, and it codes for a particular protein called the ABCC11 gene, which helps to transport certain molecules within cells and across cells, and within the ceruminous glands it helps to transport lipid-liking molecules. And these molecules, some of them can be odorous either by origin or when they eventually reach the surface, bacteria feed on it and it then can become odorous as a byproduct. And if you have a functioning ABCC11 gene, you're more likely to develop wet wax because you get more secretions, but then also you're more likely to develop, believe it or not, body odor under your armpits because these glands are also found in the armpits. If you have an inactive ABCC11 gene, so there's a mutation that causes that, you don't have these certain molecules that enter the ceruminous glands, so you secrete a different composition of molecules which are non-odorous and less viscous. And so that's how you have wet or dry earwax. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. Take care.